Zubaida was a gentle, soft-spoken woman from the busy city of Kano. She loved her husband, Malam Idris, deeply and had always tried her best to be a good wife. She cooked his meals with care, respected his parents, and prayed for his happiness every single day. Life seemed simple, but things began to change after she gave birth to their 2 daughters. Instead of joy, her in-laws started to frown. They wanted a son, someone to carry on the family name. Whispers turned into cruel words. "Only girls," they'd say, shaking their heads like she had failed. Zubaida kept quiet, even when her heart was breaking. She would kneel on her prayer mat late at night, tears streaming down her face, begging God for strength. She wasn't angry, just hurt and confused. She held her daughters close, kissed their foreheads, and told them they were her world. But the pressure didn't stop. Every day brought new insults, silent stares, and the heavy weight of rejection. Even Idris, once loving and kind, began to change. He rarely smiled at her anymore. Still, Zubaida never spoke back. She believed that silence had its own kind of prayer, and that maybe, just maybe, God was listening. In her heart, she knew that one day something would change. But for now, all she could do was wait, patiently, quietly, and with the kind of hope only a mother can carry. It was a cold, rainy night in Kano, the kind of night where everyone stayed indoors, wrapped in blankets, listening to the thunder outside. But for Zubaida, this night would change her life forever. She was pregnant again, carrying her 3rd child, and instead of comfort, she felt fear. Her husband Idris had been acting colder with each passing day, barely speaking to her, barely even looking at her. And then, without warning, he came into the room with a plastic bag and started packing her clothes. Zubaida watched in shock, her hands resting on her belly. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice shaking. Idris didn't even pause. "I need a son to carry my name," he said sharply. "You've given me nothing but daughters." His words cut through her like a knife. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was the man she loved, the father of her children. How could he throw her out, especially now with a child growing inside her? Before she could even react, he grabbed the bag, walked to the door, and opened it wide. Rain poured in, soaking the floor. "Leave," he said. "Go wherever you want, but don't stay here." Zubaida stood still for a moment, hoping he was just angry, just saying things he didn't mean. But when he turned his back and walked away, she knew this was real. He meant it. Barefoot and heartbroken, Zubaida stepped out into the night. The rain was cold, hitting her skin like tiny stones. She didn't have an umbrella, not even slippers. Her clothes clung to her body as she walked, unsure where to go. The streets were empty, dark, and full of puddles. Every step felt heavier than the last. She wrapped her arms around her belly, whispering to the baby inside, "We will survive. Mama is here." Tears mixed with the rain on her face. She thought about her daughters, sleeping in the next room, now without their mother. She thought about the home she had built, the dreams she had dreamed, all washed away in one cruel moment. But even in that pain, she kept moving. She didn't scream. She didn't turn back. Her heart was breaking, but her spirit refused to give up. That night, the world turned its back on Zubaida, but deep inside, a fire was lit. She didn't know where the road would lead, but she knew one thing: she would never beg to return. She would walk forward, one painful step at a time, with the strength only a mother could understand. Zubaida thought the worst was behind her after Idris threw her out. She believed her family would understand, believed someone, somewhere, would welcome her with open arms. But life didn't turn out that way. She knocked on the door of her uncle's house first. The lights were on, and she could hear voices inside. But when he saw her standing there, soaked and shivering, he shook his head and said, "You can't stay here. We don't want any trouble from your husband's family." He shut the door before she could even say a word. One by one, she went to the houses of people she once called family, cousins, aunties, even old family friends. Some said they had no space. Others made excuses. A few didn't open the door at all. It wasn't just the cold that made her tremble. It was the rejection, the shame in their eyes, the way they treated her like a burden. She didn't want pity, only a safe place to rest and protect her unborn child. Word spread fast. In the small villages she passed, people whispered when she walked by. "That's the woman Idris kicked out," they'd say. "She only gives birth to girls." Some looked at her with pity. others with judgment. Children stared. Elders shook their heads. Zubaida kept her eyes on the ground, holding her belly, trying not to cry in front of them. Her feet were blistered, her clothes still damp, and her stomach growled from hunger, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Days passed. She walked until her legs gave up, then rested under trees, then walked again. Finally, just outside Katsina, she saw an old, broken-down building. The sign was faded, but she could still read it. Primary Health Clinic. The place had been abandoned for years. Windows were cracked, the roof was partly fallen in, but it had walls, a roof, and it was empty. Zubaida stepped inside carefully, wiping cobwebs from the doorway. The floor was dusty, but dry. She found an old mattress in one of the rooms, torn and stained, but better than the ground. She sat down, leaned back against the wall, and closed her eyes. For the first time in days, she felt a tiny bit safe. That night, in that forgotten clinic, Zubaida cried, not from pain, but from release. No one had offered her kindness. No one had taken her in, but this broken place, this ghost of a building, had accepted her without a word. And in that silence, she made a promise to her unborn child. No matter what happens, I will never give up on you. I will never let the world break us. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And for now, that was enough. Months passed in that abandoned clinic outside Katsina. Zubaida stayed hidden, surviving on food given by a kind market woman who never asked questions. She swept the dusty rooms each day, made a bed out of blankets she found in an old storage room, and talked to her unborn baby like a friend. She didn't know if she was having a boy or a girl. She didn't care anymore. All she wanted was a safe birth, a chance to hold her child in her arms and feel love again. But one early morning, while the sky was still dark, the pain began. It was sudden and sharp. She knew what it meant. The baby was coming. She was alone. No midwife, no nurse, no one to hold her hand. Just her, the cold walls, and the sound of the wind outside. She bit her scarf to keep from screaming. Her body shook. Sweat rolled down her face. She cried out to God for help, begging for strength, begging for life, for both her and the baby. Hours passed. The pain was endless. And then finally the first baby came. A tiny, perfect girl. Zubaida cried as she wrapped her in a towel. But before she could rest, the pain returned. She didn't understand. Was something wrong? Was the baby in danger? But it wasn't danger. It was a miracle. Moments later, a second baby arrived. Another girl. Twin daughters. Zubaida stared at them, her hands shaking, her heart bursting. They were beautiful, soft brown skin, tiny fingers, peaceful faces. She counted their toes, kissed their foreheads, and whispered, "You are my everything." Then, as she cleaned them, something caught her eye. A mark, not a bruise, not dirt. A birthmark, shaped exactly like the African continent, on each of their left hands. Her eyes widened. She looked at both girls again. The same shape, the same spot. It was too perfect to be a coincidence. She gasped and began to cry, not from pain, but from awe. She didn't understand what it meant, but deep down, she felt it was something special, something sacred. A few days later, a local doctor who had heard rumors about a woman living in the clinic came by to check on her. When he saw the twins, he froze. He looked at their hands, asked her if she had any family history of rare genetic marks. She said no. He didn't know what to say. "In all my years," he whispered, "I've never seen anything like this." Word began to spread, slowly but surely. People came to see the miracle twins with the Africa mark. But for Zubaida, the real miracle wasn't the shape on their hands. It was that they were alive, that she, against all odds, had brought life into the world, alone, unwanted but unbroken. And as she held her daughters close, she whispered, "The world didn't want us, but one day it will hear our names." The old clinic outside Katsina, once filled with silence and dust, slowly became a place of life and wonder. Zubaida gave birth there, alone, with no midwife or doctor, only her courage and prayers beside her. She had no idea what kind of future was waiting, but from the moment she held her twin daughters in her arms, something felt different. They were small and delicate, yet their eyes seemed to shine with a light that was hard to explain. Each baby had a birthmark on her hand, shaped like the map of Africa. Even the few doctors who later visited were shocked. They had never seen anything like it. As the months passed, the girls, Amina and Halima grew stronger and brighter. Zubaida watched in awe as they began to do things most babies couldn't. By the time they were barely a year old, they were mimicking words in different languages Zubaida didn't even teach them. At first, she thought it was just baby talk, but then one day, she heard one of them repeating a greeting in French she'd overheard from a passing traveller. Soon after, the other girl responded in Arabic. Zubaida stared at them, stunned. "How?" she whispered. "How do you know this?" By the time they turned 3, the miracle became even more clear. Amina could speak Hausa, English, Arabic, and Swahili effortlessly, like she was born knowing them. Halima, while equally gifted with languages, had a special gift with music. One day, a local elder brought an old kora, a traditional African harp, to the clinic, curious to see the miracle twins everyone was whispering about. As soon as Halima touched it, her fingers moved like they had played it for years. The sound that came out silenced the room. People who heard her play wept without knowing why. It was music that touched the soul. Zubaida watched all of this with quiet amazement. She didn't speak much, but her eyes told a story of gratitude, of wonder, of disbelief that these incredible girls had come from her womb, born in the darkest moment of her life. She never called them special to their faces. She simply called them her blessing. Every morning she prayed for them. Every night she kissed their foreheads and whispered, "You are my light." The villagers who once looked down on her began to whisper again, but this time in awe. Stories spread far beyond Katsina. People came from nearby towns just to see the girls. Some thought they were a sign from God. Others believed they were geniuses born from pain. But Zubaida didn't need labels. All she knew was that her daughters were growing into something rare and beautiful, and she had a feeling they were just getting started. The world first heard their voices through a simple phone camera. A neighbor had visited the clinic-turned-home one afternoon and recorded Amina and Halima reciting a poem, one in Swahili, the other in Yoruba. They stood side by side, their tiny hands folded politely, their voices clear and full of feeling. It wasn't just what they said, it was how they said it, with confidence, grace, and deep understanding. The neighbor uploaded the video without thinking much of it, but by the next morning, everything changed. The video exploded online. People all over Nigeria began sharing it. Then it spread across Africa and beyond. News channels picked it up. Headlines called them Africa's twin prodigies. Some couldn't believe children so young could speak with such fluency and heart. Comments poured in from Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, even the UK. People were amazed. But more than that, they were moved. Zubaida had no idea the video had gone viral until a group of journalists showed up outside the clinic. She stepped outside, shy and unsure, holding Halima's hand. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Zubaida kept her calm. "They are just children," she said softly. "I only pray they continue to shine." A week later, a letter arrived. It was an official invitation to an international education summit in Nairobi, Kenya. The twins had been selected to perform and speak in front of some of the most respected educators and leaders from around the world. Zubaida held the letter with trembling hands, her eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of pride. She looked at her daughters and smiled. "We're going to Kenya," she whispered. The journey was like a dream. It was their first time on a plane. Amina kept asking questions about the clouds, while Halima stared out the window, her fingers moving as if playing invisible music. Zubaida sat between them, clutching their passports and thanking God with every breath. She remembered the rainy night she was thrown out, the nights she slept hungry, the days she walked barefoot, and now she was flying to another country, not alone, but with her miracle. In Nairobi, they were treated like stars. People greeted them with flowers and cheers. At the summit, Amina stood before hundreds of people and recited a powerful poem about hope, switching between Swahili and English with ease. Halima played the kora, and the entire hall fell silent, listening in awe. When they finished, the crowd gave them a standing ovation, and there, standing quietly at the edge of the stage, was Zubaida. She didn't need a microphone or applause. Just seeing her daughters shine was more than enough. She smiled, her heart full. The world was finally seeing what she had always known. Her daughters were not just gifted, they were meant to be seen, heard, and remembered. Back in Kano, Idris sat alone in his small living room, the television flickering in front of him. He wasn't really watching, just flipping through channels like he did every night. But then he paused. On the screen were two little girls, standing on a stage in Nairobi, dressed in matching African prints. One was reciting poetry in perfect Swahili. The other was playing the kora so beautifully it didn't feel real. The headline at the bottom read, "Africa's Future, the Twin Prodigies from Nigeria." Idris leaned forward slowly, his heart pounding. He knew those faces. He couldn't forget them, even if he tried. Amina and Halima, his daughters, the same children he had turned his back on, the same children he never held after they were born. Now the world was clapping for them, celebrating them, praising their brilliance, and he was sitting here, alone, with nothing but silence and shame. His chest tightened as the camera panned to their mother. Zubaida stood in the background, calm and proud, smiling gently. She hadn't changed much, but there was something stronger in her eyes now, something peaceful. Idris lowered his head. A wave of regret crushed him. He remembered the night he threw her out, the words he had said, the cruel tone, how she had begged him with tears in her eyes, holding her pregnant belly, and how he had walked away without looking back. At the time, he thought he was doing the right thing. He wanted a son. He believed having only daughters made him less of a man. His in-laws encouraged that thinking, and he followed blindly. After Zubaida left, he quickly remarried, hoping for a new start. But that marriage didn't last. His second wife left after a year, taking everything she could. They had no children, no love, just emptiness. Now, years later, the house that once echoed with voices and laughter was quiet. His own family no longer spoke to him. Even his friends avoided him. No one respected a man who had thrown out a pregnant wife, only to end up alone. Watching Amina and Halima on TV brought a deep ache to his soul. He didn't just lose a family, he lost the chance to raise two of the most gifted children the world had ever seen. And the woman who had loved him the most, the one who stayed silent through every insult, was now being honoured across nations. Idris turned off the TV and sat in the dark, his face in his hands. For the first time in his life he cried, not out of anger, but out of deep, unbearable regret. He had made the worst mistake of his life, and now he was paying the price. The daughters he had once rejected were lighting up the world, and he could only watch from far away as the past he threw away became the future everyone admired. The summit hall in Nairobi was filled with applause, laughter, and proud faces. It was the final day, and the energy in the room was electric. Amina and Halima had just finished their final performance, a mix of spoken word and music that left many in tears. Reporters rushed to interview them. Educators from around the world lined up just to shake their little hands, and in the middle of it all stood Zubaida, calm and graceful, holding both daughters close. But outside the hall, another story was unfolding. Idris had arrived quietly, unnoticed, his heart pounding with nerves and shame. He had travelled all the way from Kano, not as a proud father, but as a broken man seeking forgiveness. When he entered the hall and saw the giant banners with his daughters' faces, and the words, "Africa's Twin Gems," printed in bold, he almost turned around. But something pushed him forward. Maybe guilt, maybe hope, maybe both. He stood at the back of the hall, watching the family he had abandoned. His daughters didn't recognize him. They had never known him. But Zubaida did. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to freeze. She didn't look angry. She didn't even look surprised. Just still, as if she had always known this moment would come. When the crowd began to leave, Idris walked slowly toward the stage. The cameras turned. People whispered, "Is that their father, the man who left them?" He didn't care. He dropped to his knees right in front of Zubaida, his eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong," he said, his voice shaking. "I was blind. I was weak. I didn't see the blessing in front of me. Please, forgive me." The whole room went silent. Even Amina and Halima looked on, confused by the man kneeling before their mother. Zubaida stood still for a long moment. Then, softly, she spoke. "You gave up before destiny arrived," she said. Her words were gentle, but they hit like thunder. She wasn't cruel. She didn't shout, but her voice carried years of pain, strength, and wisdom. Idris lowered his head, unable to look at her. He had hoped for a hug, maybe a second chance. But what he got was truth, raw and honest. Zubaida didn't humiliate him. She didn't ask him to leave. She simply turned, took her daughters by the hand, and walked away with dignity. The world watched, stunned by her grace. Some clapped, some wiped their eyes. And Idris, he remained on his knees, surrounded by people, yet completely alone. That moment became one of the most talked about scenes of the entire summit, not because a man begged, but because a woman rose. Zubaida didn't need revenge. She had already won, with love, patience, and destiny on her side. The awards ceremony was held in Abuja, under bright lights, and in front of a crowd full of powerful people, leaders, scholars, educators, and celebrities. But the spotlight that night belonged to one woman in a simple dress, her headscarf neatly tied, her heart shining brighter than any jewel. Zubaida was called to the stage, not just as a mother, but as a symbol of strength, patience, and unshakable faith. As she stepped forward, holding the hands of Amina and Halima, the room rose in applause. Many had followed her story from the viral video to the Nairobi summit, but seeing her in person, quiet, graceful, and proud, moved people in ways words couldn't describe. The announcer called her the woman who raised Africa's twin gems with nothing but love and courage. And when she was handed the award, a golden plaque that sparkled in the light, tears welled up in her eyes. She didn't give a long speech, just a few simple words. "I didn't do this for fame," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I just did what any mother would do, love her children with all her heart." The prize money that came with the award was large. People expected she might move to a bigger city, buy a new house, maybe even start a new life. But Zubaida had a different dream. She knew there were so many women like her, abandoned, rejected, forgotten, who were still walking alone in the dark, carrying children and broken hearts. She couldn't help everyone, but she could start somewhere. So she bought a piece of land in Abuja, not in the rich part of town, but in a quiet area where land was still affordable and the need was great. There, she began building a school, not just for children, but for the mothers who had nowhere else to go, a safe place, a place of healing. She called it the House of Second Chances. The school had classrooms for young children, a small dorm for women who needed shelter, and skill centers where mothers could learn sewing, cooking, or start small businesses. Zubaida was there every day, walking from room to room, smiling at babies, comforting women, teaching girls that their worth wasn't tied to anyone's opinion. Amina and Halima helped too. When they weren't studying or traveling for events, they read to the younger kids, helped teach songs, or played music to lift spirits. They had seen their mother's pain. Now they watched her create purpose from it. Zubaida didn't seek attention. She didn't brag, but word spread fast. People began donating. Volunteers came from across Nigeria. The school grew, and everywhere Zubaida went, people would stop her, not to ask for autographs, but to say thank you. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for turning heartbreak into hope. And every time, she'd just smile and say, "This is only the beginning." Years passed, but the names Amina and Halima stayed in the hearts of millions. They became national icons, not just for their intelligence, talent, and grace, but for the story that carried them. Their faces appeared on billboards, in textbooks, on the covers of magazines. Children across Africa looked up to them. Schools invited them to speak. Presidents applauded them, and international awards followed one after another. But through it all, they never forgot where they came from or who raised them. Whenever they spoke on big stages or gave interviews, they always began with the same words. "Everything we are, we owe to our mother." Zubaida never chased the spotlight, but it found her anyway. People wrote songs about her. Filmmakers told her story. Women named their daughters after her. In villages and cities, her name was spoken with love and respect, not just as a mother, but as a fighter, a woman of grace who turned pain into purpose. She didn't carry banners or shout to be heard. She carried her children with quiet strength, and that quiet strength shook the world. People said she was the woman who turned rejection into a blessing, the one who showed that even when life throws you into the cold, with nothing but tears and prayers, something beautiful can still grow. A name that was once unknown in a corner of Kano had become a symbol across the continent, a symbol of patience, dignity, and divine surprise. Zubaida's name would never be forgotten, because she didn't just raise daughters, she raised a legacy.